All righty, it looks like we're live. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I know we have people joining us from airports right across Canada, from Vancouver to Fredericton, so thank you all for being here today. My name is Brock Penner, and I am the Interim Executive Director of IAAE Canada. Welcome to the very first edition of our new free monthly webinar series. We are excited to launch this new initiative, and we hope this webinar series becomes a regular opportunity for airport professionals from across the country to learn from one another. As we build the series, we're always looking for future speakers and sponsors. So if you have a case study, a lesson learned, an industry best practice, or another topic you think would be valuable to share with airport professionals from across the country, please feel free to reach out and we would love to hear from you. And likewise, if your organization is interested in sponsoring a future webinar, we'd be happy to hear from you as well. This free series is made possible through the generous support of our sponsors, and I'd like to thank Explorer Solutions for sponsoring today's inaugural webinar. Before we get started, here's a quick look at today's agenda. We will begin with a brief introduction to IAAE Canada from a member of our board of directors, Laura Mortensen. Then you'll hear a few words from our sponsor today, Explorer Solutions. And after that, we'll move into today's presentation from Jacob Salway, Airport Duty Manager at Kelowna International Airport, who will share his experience managing through crisis during the 2023 wildfires. Depending on how long Jacob's presentation goes, we hope to set aside at least 10 minutes at the end to answer your questions. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. The chat function is available to all attendees at the top of your screen, but we ask that you use the chat only for technical difficulties or any pressing concerns. If you have questions for Jacob, please submit them at any time during his presentation using the Q&A function. You should see the Q&A button on your screen, likely near the top right. We'll hold all questions until the end of the presentation, and then I'll moderate the discussion by reading your questions aloud. When submitting a question, of course, we'd appreciate if you could include your name and your organization. If I've done my job right, you should be able to also upvote questions when they show up in the Q&A function, and that will allow us to prioritize questions during the Q&A function that are most relevant. And if we don't make it to all of today's Q&A, I'll work directly with Jacob to answer any outstanding questions, and we'll be sure to send out his responses with a recording of today's webinar. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Laura Mortensen from our board of directors, who will tell you a little bit about IAAE Canada before we get started.
All right, just sharing my screen here. So I'm Laura Mortensen. I've been on the board of directors for IAAE Canada since 2020, and I've been an accredited airport professional since 2018. I also have the unique experience that I was living in Kelowna during the wildfires of 2023 that Jacob is talking about. So I know that the Kelowna Airport faced some unique challenges, and that always leads to unique solutions. So I'm sure Jacob's got lots to tell us today. That being said, I won't take too much time to get in the way, but I did want to sort of just present some of the things that IAAE Canada has been doing for its members and kind of what our point is and our focus. So we've been serving the airport community for over 30 years now. One of the biggest things that we've been doing is the accreditation program. And so that is the Accredited Airport Executive and Accredited Airport Professional programs. This is sort of the ultimate training for someone who's coming into the airport industry to get sort of a knowledge of all the different aspects of being in an airport, because we all know that there's always a lot going on and there's lots of different avenues to learn about. So the biggest start to that, if you are interested, is joining our Accreditation Academy and signing up online. So our next Accreditation Academy is happening this October in Abbotsford. So information on the website, information here. If you are interested, definitely get in touch with Brock and Julia. It's a great program, and anyone who's been on it will tell you that. One of the other things we do is training programs and courses. So this is helping the industry with sort of timely training initiatives, things that we need to get out there in the industry, as well as just some of the regulatory training that's required on a regular basis. So here are some of our upcoming courses. We have QA and corrective action, SMS human factors, TP312 5th edition. wildlife management, and AMSCR, CURFI, GFR, CRO courses all coming up shortly. They are all posted on the website. So any of those interest you, just go to the website to sign up. We also host some conferences and events. So our biggest conference is our foam conference, and that happens usually in the spring of each year. So look for information coming soon for foam 2027. And then in addition to that, we try to provide some additional member benefits and content. So like this webinar today, we are working on some more initiatives to get out there a little bit more, get some more information to our members. But if you have some suggestions of things, we are always happy to hear what our members would like to see, or potential members as well. And yeah, so any more information, if you do want to keep up to date, the best way is to sign up for the newsletter. Then you will get all the information from Brock and Julia sort of as it comes out. Know about these webinars. I know we have a lot of awesome topics planned in addition to this one from Jacob today. So we'd love to see you at a future webinar as well. So thank you all on behalf of the board of directors for coming to our first webinar today. And we hope it all goes smoothly and that everyone's gets some great information. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, if you'd like any more information about IAAE Canada, please visit our website. It's on my background, IAAEcanada.org. You can reach all of our staff. There's Julia, myself, and then Denise, who's not here today, but we can be reached at headquarters at IAAEcanada.org. And as Laura said, I'd encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, which you can do at the bottom of our website. We do send out regular updates about everything Laura mentioned. So our accreditation program, upcoming trainings, our conference, things like this webinar, etc. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jason Kipfer from Explorer Solutions, who will tell you a little bit about their organization. They are the sponsor of today's first webinar. So Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Brock. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you across Canada who are joining today's webinar. Explorer Solutions is proud to sponsor today's webinar, bringing together airport professionals from across Canada to share ideas, experiences, and practical insights. We believe that collaboration and knowledge sharing help build stronger airports and stronger communities, and we're pleased to make this session available at no cost to everyone attending today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll find today's discussion both informative and valuable. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Explorer Solutions, I'd like to just take a quick moment to briefly introduce our firm. Explorer Solutions is a boutique research and consulting firm. We are headquartered at the Peterborough Airport, and we've been in operations just over 30 years. We were acquired by the Lumex Group in our 25th year and headquartered at the Peterborough Airport in Peterborough, Ontario. And we specialize in airport planning and development and providing municipalities with economic development services and strategic planning. The bulk of our clients include small, rural, and remote and regional airports and municipalities across Canada. And we work with nonprofit organizations, municipal governments, airport authorities, and government agencies. I'm not going to go over all of our different service lines on the airport planning and development side, but I would like to just reinforce the message and the importance that we are a full stop service provider to our airport clients, colleagues, and friends across Canada, as well as the US Midwest, and focusing primarily on airport master planning and all aspects that go into it. One of the things that we are really known for and enjoy doing is working with our airport colleagues to demonstrate the importance of their regional and municipal airports as strong and key economic drivers for the local community, and also positioning airports as gateways for tourism development within those communities. On the economic development side of our portfolio, we work with municipalities and provide that strategic planning and economic development to ensure those businesses and those communities can support their broader municipal area with business retention and attraction and expansion opportunities, tourism development, and other economic development goals and objectives to ensure a long-term sustainable community. And lastly, I'd just like to highlight some of the advantages of working with Explorer Solutions and the advantages that we bring to our airport and municipal projects. really importantly for us is that we combine industry knowledge with local knowledge, as well as data-driven insights to help form our recommendations for all of our projects. Working with Explorer Solutions, you have access to an established network of subject matter experts across Canada. Explorer Solutions has invested heavily in ensuring a strong commitment to stakeholder engagement, ensuring that projects reflect the community priorities. Our reports become the basis for the playbook towards implementation, and we have a strong track record of successful projects that enhance investment readiness, economic growth, and long-term prosperity for airports and municipalities across Canada. Again, thank you for the opportunity for us to support this critical webinar this afternoon, and we're looking forward to the insights from Jacob. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Jason. And once again, I'd like to thank Explorer Solutions for sponsoring today's webinar. Their support, along with the support of our other sponsors throughout the year, will allow us to offer this webinar series free of charge to anyone interested in attending. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jacob Salway, Airport Duty Manager at Kelowna International Airport. Jacob brings a strong operational background, including 17 years with Vancouver Airport Authority across both terminal and airside operations before moving to Kelowna in 2022. Today, Jacob will take us through the 2023 Okanagan wildfires and their operational impact on Kelowna International Airport, focusing on real-time decision-making, regulatory interpretation, and the communication challenges that come with managing a rapidly evolving emergency. This presentation was first delivered at this year's FOAM conference, which Laura mentioned is our premier annual conference. It took place in St. John's just about a month and a half ago at the beginning of May. And it was initially presented as part of Jacob's accreditation journey through IAAE Canada. It was one of the highest rated presentations at the conference. And so with that, we're pleased to have the opportunity to share it with an even broader audience through this webinar series. It's a highly relevant case study with practical lessons that can help airports of all sizes strengthen their emergency preparedness and response planning. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome Jacob Salway. And over to you, Jacob.
Well, thanks, Brock, and appreciate. I think we need to recognize Brock, Julia, Laura, and the rest of the board for putting these on. I think just some of the over the past year or so, my experience doing the accreditation process has been nothing but positive, and a lot of forward-thinking folks over there. And I think the future looks bright for IAAE and going forward with the training and these webinars. So let's dive in, and I'll share my screen here. So a lot to cover, but I'm going to give you a brief overlay of the 2023 Okanagan wildfires, their impact to Kelowna and the region, and try to give you an overview of what we went through and kind of lessons learned and what we took away from that. So I'm just going to go over a lot of the impacts to YLW, key focus on our airspace restrictions, our ARF response, some of our communication, what went well, what didn't, some financial impacts, my own personal experience, and then just wrap it up and kind of give you that lessons learned. So as Brock mentioned, I got into aviation at a young age, got my pilot's licenses and my private pilot's license at 17, a little bit of float flying, and completed the BCIT Airport Operations Diploma Program. From there, I spent just shy of 17 years at Vancouver International Airport in various roles. And in 2022, lucky enough to move up to Kelowna and work for a great organization up here with the city of Kelowna as an airport duty manager. So for some of you that don't know where Kelowna is or have never been to Kelowna, I definitely recommend getting up here. It's located in the beautiful Okanagan Valley. It's got world-class wineries, a lot of skiing, snowboarding, great lakes, golfing, which I love, and it's the weather that really boasts everyone's experience. Kelowna International Airport serves over 22 destinations Some of those are seasonal. We are Canada's 9th busiest airport and one of Canada's fastest growing airports. 2023, when the fire occurred, we saw just over 2 million passengers. And this year in 2026, we are anticipated just below 2.5 million passengers. So diving right into the impacts to WildW from the fire. To do that, you have to look back at 2023 and kind of what steps led up to the fire. So the 2023 wildfire season was one of the driest on records, dating back to 1903. Average precipitation in Kelowna for the year is about 366 millimeters of rain and snow. In that year alone, we were about half of that. The previous 60 days prior to the fire starting, we only had 13 millimeters of rain. So another big key is 30 of the previous 45 days for the fire, we had temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius. So all the recipes were there for a bad fire season. The fire was first reported in the evening of Tuesday, August 15th. It was small in nature, about a half a hectare. To this date, the cause of the fire has still not been determined. By the following morning, the fire had grown to 4 hectares, and then later that evening, it had grown to 32 hectares. We started getting weather warnings issued. There was a cold front that was going to be moving through the following day, and there was some concerns that we'd see rapid fire growth. You started seeing local state of emergencies declared on West Kelowna, and as of 8 o'clock that evening, the fire became a fire of note through our BC Wildfire Services team. You also started getting the first evacuation alerts issued. So as you can see there on the bottom right corner of the picture there, you can see the bridge crossing the lake. You can see where the fire started. Everything on the west side of that lake to your left is West Kelowna, and everything on the right is the proper city of Kelowna. On the Wednesday, the following day, August 16th, we started seeing our first impacts from the fire. It was airspace related, and you can see there it affected 6 of our approaches and 1 of our departure approaches or routes. On Thursday, August 17th, the fire grew rapidly. As of about 11 o'clock in the morning, the fire was now over 300 hectares. Evacuation orders were being issued for the city of West Kelowna, and the alerts expanded all the way up the west side of the lake. By 1800 that evening, the fire was now over 1,100 hectares and was rapidly growing. The fire was now highly visible on the Kelowna side, and everyone was down on the beaches watching the fire. At this point, the fire crews were doing what they call the follow method, where basically the fire was burning so fast that they could not get ahead of it. It was not safe. So what they were doing was coming in behind the fire and basically mopping up the hot spots as the fire was moving. Later that evening at about just shy of 10 o'clock, the fire jumped the lake about 2.5 kilometers. So when you're starting to get winds of 70, 80 kilometers an hour and embers flying across, it jumped the lake, and at just shy of 10 o'clock there, it formed what we know as the Walroy Lake wildfire on the true city limits of Kelowna. One of the quotes that night for our fire chief on the west side was, "It was like 100 years of firefighting in one night with more to come." So Friday, August 18th, we still have the NOTAM that's, well, as the airport, we're getting a head start, flights trying to go out. There's confusion. Nav Canada is reporting that there is a wildfire close to the airport, and there's word that we're also going to get further airspace restrictions. So a few of our Head Start flights did depart around 6 a.m. and others chose not to fly, and we'll go into the CARS talk in a second here. As we said, NOTAM was issued, and in that NOTAM, there was a 10 nautical mile radius, essentially closing the airspace over the airport. At that point, all flights in and out of Kelowna Airport were halted, and areas adjacent to the airport were now being evacuated. The There was a call for our ARF team to respond, and they responded accordingly. And later in that day, the fire jumped the lake further up the lake and formed what we call the Clark Creek wildfire, now burning up in Lake Country. Now, those three fires combined created what we call the Grouse Complex wildfire. So on Saturday, the following day after the airspace closures, we had no aircraft movements. We had extra staff on hand to answer phone calls. We had a customer care set up. We had our operations team working with Transport Canada, BC Wildfire Services, NAV Canada, on trying to get the resumption of flights during the overnight hours. Generally, we see firefighting and aerial activities during the day, and our goal there on the Saturday was to lobby for getting the airspace open at night and being able to get some commercial flights in and out. Late Saturday evening-ish, Transport Canada reported that we could resume operations on Sunday evening, which was August 20th, from 2100 to 0600. So we had just a little over 24 hours to prepare for this. After about 2.5 days, we were able to offer that operation with limited approaches. Everything had to be approved through Transport Canada, and there was some confusion to this as Transport Canada in the NOTAM and with airlines understanding who do they call, how does that process work. And as I said, we had about 24 hours to prepare. So we had to get airlines passenger notifications out. We had to work with our stakeholders and at our pre-board screening points, our non-passenger screening points, and ensuring that even our food and beverage operators were open and being able to serve passengers in and out of Kelowna. Our staffing, from the RCMP to our campus staff to our duty manager team, we need to ensure that we were there and open and ready to go and switch operations to the night. One of the things we had an overwhelming number of requests to operate. The majority of flights and airlines wanted to operate between the 2100 and 2300 timeframe, and this made it incredibly busy. And one of the things that NAV Canada turned around and responded to us was they simply couldn't handle the aircraft in here and with our operations, and so we had to work with them on a process to space them out, almost kind of implementing a flow control into Kelowna. Another thing that we had to determine was our local tower closes at 22:30 and Penticton Flight Service takes over at that time. So there's some transitions there, as well as just the area control center and their staffing levels at that time, because it's generally a quieter time in the evening. So a lot of moving parts there that we had to work with them and had to kind of, as mentioned, develop an ad hoc slot program here to get in. And as that progressed throughout the event, we were able to, sort of iron out the issues there, and it worked a lot smoother. Some things to consider during that event where our runway inspections needed to continue, our airfield projects that were out there still happening, but also with consideration to staff working outside with the smoke and limiting their exposure. During the fire, there was 2 navigational hazard beacons that were lost. One was power cut and one burnt up. Our northwest beacon there was out for over 10 weeks before we got a repair just prior to Halloween. Logistics, making sure we had enough jet fuel and avgas. One thing we learned prior to when we lost heavy rains in the Coquihalla was ensuring we had multiple avenues for our jet fuel deliveries so that we didn't run out. Road closures are number one thing, so keeping track and making sure the logistics still worked out. We had questions in my presentation about wildlife, and did we see an increase of wildlife? We did. One of the things was bird activity because the fire encroached on our local landfill, and we had bird activity from the west that moved over the airport and set up extra patrols from the operations team. From a terminal perspective, some lessons learned we had were maintenance, making sure we changed the air filters out. It also provided us a great time to do some deep cleaning while there was limited folks in the building. Staffing, our food and beverages mentioned earlier, and our parking and our taxis and the ground transportation. You can see over the course of the airspace restrictions for that week, we had about 582 flights planned, and out of that, 441 of those flights were canceled, and 142 of the flights operated. Some of those movements are commercial as well as medevac and wildfire related. So one of the big key things, and something that I'm passionate about and getting involved in more and more, is the Canadian aviation regulations around wildfires. There's really 3 sections within that, and the first one is defining what a wildfire is. It's an area of the surface of the earth which standing timber, grass, or other vegetation or buildings are burning. It's very broad. That interpretation, it affects us a lot. So basically, anytime you have an area of grass, or you could interpret it a house near your airport, there is potential impact that it could have on your airspace, and something that you need to be cognizant about and be on top of. So what happens after it's defined as a wildfire is we go straight into the regulation 601.15, and that says around that wildfire, there's a 5 nautical mile radius and 3,000 feet AGL. That is a blanket closure. So a NOTAM does not need to be in place for that closure to take effect and that regulation to be in place. So that one is a lot of the kind of the gray area that you get into, where who's enforcing that. And a lot of the confusion we have on Kelowna over the years with any fire here is sort of the what happens in that kind of in between time before other agencies can assess it and impact it further. And the last there, 601.16, the minister may issue a NOTAM that relates to the restriction of the operation of the aircraft for the forest fire and describe. So essentially, BC Wildfire Service would let Transport Canada know there's a fire in the area, and they would issue a NOTAM in relationship. So not are we just relying on the cars now, the regulations that says there's a closure. We now have a NOTAM that goes out to all pilots and operators to let them know that there is impacts. In this case, they may choose to increase that area of the closure. They may increase the height, AGL, and so forth. There's also a stipulation in the cars that the minister may give approval to aircraft to operate. And this is what we use to operate at night. So yes, there's a fire, there is a regulation, there is a closure, but we will give you written exemption, has to be written, and your flight can operate under certain conditions, and they're all spelled out in that approval letter that you would get from Transport Canada to operate. In this section, it also doesn't apply to anything related to the wildfire response. So any of those aircraft are already exempt with a blanket approval. So what this leads to, and as I mentioned before, our BC Wildfire Service, which is our provincial wildfire service for dealing with forest fires, notifies Transport Canada of the fire. Transport Canada then says, I need to issue some NOTAMs. I need to reach out and work with NAV Canada. It's close to an airport, and then they start issuing blanket airspace closures. From our airport perspective, what we are looking for is collaborative decision making. We're not trying to get in the way of NAV Canada or Transport Canada. We just want to have a say at the table. We want to be part of that. It's decisions are being made that have a huge financial as well as operational impact on your airport. As an airport, you need to be cognizant of this, you need to be aware of this, and you need to sort of protect your assets. For a prime example of this, on your left there, you can see the airspace closure, and the proposed closure at one point from BC Wildfire Services was just to draw a line down the middle of the lake or close to it, and everything to the east of that line over the water was open. The airport wasn't collaborated on this, and if you look you can see the yellow dot which is our NDP and part of our missed approach procedure for our ILS runway 16. So after talking to BC Wildfire Service, Transport Canada, and NAV Canada, we had that area restriction rescinded, which allowed us to get our missed approach back and some of our departures there. So if we hadn't been on top of this and prepared for this and looking at this, this is something that was unnecessary closure and could have. It was impacting our business, and by offering that ILS and getting it back, we were helping our operators and from a safety perspective, making it a safer approach. One thing the Canadian Airport Council got involved in was they commissioned a study on airspace management in a wildfire. The OSTA committee, that's one of the subcommittees of the Airport Council from safety perspective, came out with 2 goals for 2026. And that is that NAV Canada shares a graphical overlay of their approach and departures. It's a KMZ file. So as you can see on the right there, it's basically showing your approach and your departure routing, your missed approach, your waypoints, and understanding that. Now you go, why do I need a KMZ file? Well, a KMZ file gives that graphical overlay and allows you to plot where the fire is so that you're educated and you can understand that, yes, the fire is located here. If I put my 5 nautical mile, 3,000 feet radius closure in there, where does it impact me? Is it a small portion of a corner there of my departure route or arrival route? Or is it impacting the actual runway and airspace above the airport itself? So it educates you, and having these at your fingertips, it only goes to serve and help you planning and recovery. Another thing is, I mentioned before, is collaborating with Transport Canada and NAV Canada. Something I didn't experience at Vancouver, obviously, with the urbanness there, you didn't get the wildfires. Up here in Kelowna, in 4 years being up here, I think we've had about 5 to 6 wildfires that have impacted the airport and closed part of the airspace since then. Some for brief periods of half an hour, some 5-6 hours, and in this case, in 2023, it was up to a week of direct impact and further out. One thing that we kind of got a beta version that NAV Canada's working on, and in the background is a future graphical NOTAM that they're working on. In this case right here, this shows you FIFA World Cup that's happening right now, and some airspace restrictions, so they can plot it in there, show that graphical overlay of that NOTAM. What they plan on using this for in the future, what we've been told is they could plot that fire and overlay it on that KMZ file, and everybody could have a read-only access and be able to see it quite clearly. So I think this is going to be really good, because not only are we dealing with the radius here, that they can change that shape, they can make it tweak it a bit to make it fit within airspace, so it's still safe for the fire response and the aerial support, but that it takes operational routings and so forth into play, and it's a great tool for Transport Canada and NAV Canada to be able to look at this, and I think it'll be really helpful down the road. And their plan is to use it for airports as well as airline dispatchers have read-only access for this. Again, still in beta version, but I think this is really exciting from NAV Canada's side. In our firefighting response team, doesn't happen always, but you look at your airport firefighters as strictly at the airport and in their category and their response. But in 2023, they were called upon by the city of Kelowna to respond, and they were able to set up basically prior to the fire, we didn't have an agreement and resources and sort of a memorandum in place. So one of the things our fire chief and operations managers got in place was an agreement, and we had a couple of fire trucks respond, and you can see there to Wilden neighborhood, which is just west of the airport by about 10 minutes, as well as up to McKinley beach, which is another about 15-20 minutes, and they were able to work in the neighborhoods and work alongside our structure firefighters and provided a great response, and they're a perfect truck for wildfire response. They've got the turrets, they've got the cannons, they can shoot out water over top of houses, and was a great asset to the team, and provide that protection to the houses. And it's not every day you get to see a airport response fire truck cruising, cul-de-sacs and residential neighborhoods. So a great experience for the team here. One thing to note there is once those agreements were placed and we were on their asset list, the salaries and equipment costs that were involved in those crews that responded were all covered. It should be noted that our airport response and firefighting category was maintained at all times. And as noted, we have a mutual aid agreement now in place for any future events that we can be called on. Communications during the wildfire. After being in many events over my years, I will say that the communication as a whole, from the cities, all levels of government, and actually went remarkably well. Internally here at Kelowna, we used a lot of Microsoft Teams because we had staff that were at home and in various locations throughout the city. So having daily check-ins and being able to use Microsoft Teams was an asset. We were able to get, from an external standpoint, messaging out to Visor Airport Campus, understanding, giving traveling public with our website updates, use of the ticker, the thing that scrolls across the top of the website to get key information out. Don't come to the airport, come to the airport, flights resuming, making sure you're providing timely media updates, and making sure those media updates are accurate, making sure you're controlling the narrative. The airport's not closed, but the airspace around the airport is closed, but the airport is ready to respond at the moments we're given approval to operate. And again, just making sure you're giving information out not only to your internal teams, but external airport campus and stakeholders, as well as the traveling public. One of the things from a cost recovery standpoint was the financial impacts and the costs. So early on, the airport decided that we would be looking at insurance claim process. We had business interruption insurance. From your airport, depending on your size and your impact to your operations, it'll be something that you need to decide on. Is it worth pursuing? In our case, after adding up the AIF and the non-AIF revenue losses, we made that decision to pursue a claim, working with an adjuster. One of the big keys from our financial team in our department there was start gathering data ASAP. So what's the benchmark from last year, month over month? So we were in our busy summer period. So a week in our summer period is different than, say, a week in our shoulder season. So making sure you get accurate data, making sure you start collecting it right away. Screenshotting NOTAMs and anything from a government regulatory data standpoint that impacts you and causes you to have those losses. So in our case, we started pursuing that, worked with our insurance company back and forth, and eventually had to go and get a specialized adjuster that their job was solely working with wildfires and claims there. And that cost that we spent to work with that adjuster that was specialized in that area was all tax write-off in the end too. So can't share the number, but in the end, we were able to settle and come up with a claim there that was satisfied financially for us. Moving to the personal side of things. As mentioned, I moved up to Kelowna in about 2022, and about a year later was able to purchase a house in the beautiful Rose Valley neighborhood, which is on the west side, which, as you can see, some of the pictures you're about to see was in direct line of the fire, and we were evacuated, but I wanted to share with you kind of that personal side of things. From when the fire started, and just how quickly things can change over time. On August 17th there, which is that Thursday, you can see from my front door the fire creeping towards it. And luckily my wife is the smart one and packed up our to-go bag and got the kids out, and we were able to make our way down to Grandma and Grandpa's house. One of the lessons learned from that personal standpoint was you need to plan ahead, not only at work, but at home, and making sure that you have a to-go bag. Make sure you review your insurance coverage, protect your home. There's so much out there from a fire smart standpoint that you need to protect your home. You need to video document your possessions. One of the things that came back after lessons learned in the community was houses that were fire smarted, that had brush, trees, and everything cleared away, stood up a lot better than homes that weren't. So out of the structures that were lost, a lot of them had poor fire smart around their home. So big key there. Last thing there is do not stand outside with a garden hose. I'm not saying I did, but I did. And my neighbors gave me a heck for that. So a garden hose, get out, safety first. So in wrapping up and looking at some of the things we had to do after, we did commission a post-event after action report. It looked at a lot of factors. One of our biggest thing was our emergency response plan. The first thing that went into our emergency response plan after was wildfires approaching the airport. You need to define what staff are critical, both internally and externally. If the RCMP or police service in your area knock on your door at your airport and say you got to evacuate, you got to be ready. You have to have a plan ready. You need to be, who's doing what, who's sticking around, and go from there. Equipment. So are we moving equipment out of buildings? Are we moving the fire trucks to the runway? Are we parking things on the apron? Aircraft, essential things, trying to get things away from buildings and again, almost fire smarting your airport. Conducting a HIRA. So looking at hazards in and around your airport. Where's the fire going to come from? Can we make fire breaks? Is there any other areas around the airport that we can fireproof again? And just looking at it overall. One of the things we did through this event is we didn't have an true ECC activation. So a lot of our stuff was done internally over the teams without a true activation. So looking forward to the future is do we continue to operate that way, or do we want to activate our ECC, work with our city ECC and our resources that they can provide, as well as ensuring that everything that we're doing there ties into our business continuity plan, recovery, alternate ECC, stuff like that, that if we do get evacuated, we can still operate. The Okanagan wildfires were the 10th costliest insurance loss in Canadian history. It just so happens the costliest one was the Fort McMurray wildfire. So you can see we've had wildfires and impacts on communities are definitely in the top 10 in insurance losses. So something not to take lightly. 35,000 residents were evacuated. About 14,000 hectares were burned. A lot of resources responded. In the end, there was 303 structures lost. Not a single life was lost, which was great. And just to go on, these things don't go away overnight. So the fire was officially held on September 20th, and all the airspace closures and effects for that fire were not lifted until the end of September. Only for about a couple weeks later for another fire to start up, which had more impacts that lasted a week. But these don't just start and end overnight. So again, making sure that you're on top of it and understand that your plan and your business continuity going forward. And in the end, is prevention. Understanding the conditions that can trigger this and fire proofing and smarting your area and your community. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Jacob. So I will just ask anyone that has any questions, please go ahead and place them in the Q&A. I think you had a captive audience, Jacob. I don't see any questions yet in the queue. But I'll kick it off with one. So you talked about in one of your closing slides there, one of your key learnings being to define your critical staff. I also saw one of your stats there is that 35,000 people were evacuated from the city. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, did you lose key personnel due to evacuation orders or other personal circumstances? And if so, how did that impact your operations? And maybe that goes back to what you were saying about implementing Microsoft Teams as people were mobile and working remotely. But any lessons learned on losing critical staff due to evacuations and how you managed through that?
As far as the critical staff, Brock, it's understanding kind of obviously your ARF category being maintained at that point. So having that benchmark, but understanding your security team and maintaining your CRA, your critical restricted area, if it is that needed. So in our case, we had members of our team that were evacuated, members of our team that were protecting their homes from fire that had personal reasons too. So there's that balance that had to happen between maintaining operations as well as maintaining personal property. So in the end, we were able to balance that. And again, Microsoft Teams, daily check-ins. Our fire team did great by they were working the fire themselves. So they were able to do that. An operations team. There wasn't a lot to do from the operational standpoint. It was more looking and lobbying and trying to get the airspace open and trying to move forward. So when that occurred, there was a few logistics there. But initially, it was a lot of waiting and seeing.
We do have a question in the chat from Sherry Hill. It's a bit of a long one, so maybe you want to open the chat on your screen as well, Jacob, but I'll read it out to you first, and then you can refer back to it as needed. So she asks, at the onset, how closely did your ERP of key procedures, communication channels, escalation paths, and response roles align with what actually happened? If you could give a percentage rating, what would you estimate it to have been? So why don't we start with that?
At the key onset, how did you?
I think she's asking how well did your plans serve you? And if you could quantify it, like we were able to rely on our plan for 80% of things and 20% was new, are you able to give an anecdote around that?
It's a tough one because the first thing that's mentioned there is we didn't plan for a wildfire approaching the airport. If we'd done a high run, conducted that prior to the fire, you'd be hard pressed to find where the fire approached from as being up there in our list. So as far as the emergency response plan and procedures, Sherry, it was very fluid. It was moving. I would say our emergency response plan was there to deal with everything, but not necessarily in that particular order. So we relied a little bit just on common sense and operational knowledge more than our emergency response plan. Since then, our emergency response plans covers that off. It looks at moving equipment and so forth. Are there categories additions not mandated by CAR, such as mentioned a financial component that you would make recommendations to include an airport should consider addressing with their? That's a tough one. I think cars are there and they're broad. They're also very old. So I think looking forward at some of those things, they haven't changed over the years. From an airspace restrictions process, there are tools out there and technology out there that that I think will help going forward in the future with airspace closures and that, and being able to control them and not and protecting your business assets. Should the financial be in there? I don't know. Sherry, sorry. I think they're separate, in my opinion.
So I think, Jacob, just along those lines, and I think you can sort of park the wildfire incident for this question, and just sort of think back to your ERPs and your plans in place. Is there one piece of advice that you would leave today's audience with to go back and look at your ERPs and your plans and see if, one thing or a handful of things have been considered?
The hazard assessment is the number one. Go back, look at your hazard, think outside the box. You need to go back and you need to look at that, and it doesn't make sense. And then not only look at that and put it on paper, but do a live drill in your emergency response plan. I know everyone wants to do crash on airport or aircraft standby emergency or so forth, but are we practicing a wildfire approaching your airport? Are we looking at that things and go forward with that? Putting it's one thing to put pen to paper, but actually practicing it and rolling it out and putting those key components in the emergency response plan. I think going forward, you really need to look outside the box there. So that's where I'd leave it there, Brock.
I'll ask if anyone has any other questions. And in the meantime, I'll ask you one additional one. So you talked about, I think it was in your communication section. You talked about, I think you even said you were surprised how well you were able to collaborate and communicate in partnership with a variety of stakeholders. In rapidly evolving incidents such as this, sometimes that can be a real challenge, right? Getting on the same page with all the various stakeholders. So would you say your plans and the relationships you had in place maybe helped you with the positive outcome that you were surprised to see, or did it all just kind of come together organically?
It was a positive. Communication was positive. I don't think we agreed with everything that was coming out from a political standpoint, because at the end we may not agree with what was being messaged. One of the key attributing factors was telling people not to come to the Okanagan, and it's one of those things that you plan for the worst, and then if you have to lift those restrictions, you do. So the communication was fluid, and those relationships. And again, we're a municipal airport, which helps us build those relationships with our teams around. So having the 2003 fire, having fires subsequently before this big 2023 event, you learn from everyone and you have takeaways.
Why don't we end it on this one? It's broad, it's open-ended. If there's one key takeaway that you'll leave everyone with today, what would that be?
One key takeaway. I think the key takeaway, Brock, is definitely learning about your airspace, learning about the impacts. So the fire, and I think the biggest key takeaway is the fire does not have to be near your airport to be impactful. So you need to be looking 10, 20 nautical miles out, if not further, and understanding that a fire that's not necessarily seen at your airport can still have effects there. So big key takeaway is knowing your key agencies, your Transport Canada, your NAV Canada, even your your provincial or territorial wildfire service, having those numbers and getting together in a group and before the wildfire season. We have a great Pacific Wildfire Working Group. So working together collaboratively prior to that every fire season is my number one key takeaway, so that when it does happen, you have those relationships built already.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I saw on your closing slide that you had put up your email for any questions. If you want to just read that aloud again, so anyone can contact you if they do have any additional questions.
Yeah, my email is Salway, that's SALWAY, at Kelowna.ca.
Perfect. Well, Jacob, Laura, Jason, thank you guys very much for helping us out with our inaugural webinar. Jacob, especially appreciate you giving this presentation. As I said, it was super well received at our phone conference, and so we were pleased to bring it to another audience. And of course, Explorer Solutions, thank you so much for sponsoring our first webinar. So if anyone has any questions about IAAE Canada, you can visit us at our website at IAAEcanada.org. You'll also find our headquarters email address there, so you can reach out to myself or Julia directly. As we mentioned earlier, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter so you get updates on things like these webinars. If you have any additional questions about Explorer Solutions, their website is up there as well, explorersolutions.ca. And with that, I think we will wrap up just a few minutes early. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar probably within the next couple of days, and we'll be announcing our upcoming webinars very soon. We do have one in the works on defense spending opportunities for airports across Canada. We're also working on one about Indigenous relations and reconciliation and opportunities for airports, and also one on the marketing and communication side, so a significant rebranding project. So we'll announce the details of those soon. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. Thanks once again, Jacob, Laura, Jason, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.